Pamela, are you there? Pamela.
Hi, I'm here. How are you?
Fantastic. So Pamela, you're in Miami also, is that correct?
I am. I'm in Coconut Grove, Miami. I'm in my home in Coconut Grove right now.
Oh, one of the places I love.
Yeah.
Anyway, you got the next panel on family office strategies for 2021, and we're looking forward to. Can you introduce yourself and your panelists?
Perfect. So welcome everyone. My name is Pamela Brilski. I'm a senior vice president at Morgan Stanley. I work with family offices and ultra high net worth clients on managing their investment portfolio, as well as estate planning strategies, tax advisory, essentially outsourcing any family office services to me and my team. Started my business at Goldman Sachs. I was at Goldman Sachs for about 5 years. Prior to that, I was at the Carlyle Group as a transactional advisor. And I initially started out my career in New York as a private equity attorney with Paul Weiss and Latham & Watkins, working on private equity, M&A, and financing deals for domestic and global companies as well. So that's my background. Live in Miami, Florida with 2 kids. I have a 4-year-old son, 1-year-old daughter. We just moved to Miami 2 years ago. Before that, we were in Houston. Before that, in New York. So looking forward to having this discussion. We have a great panel. And we have some great topics we're going to dive into. So thank you all for the time and for joining us. I think it's just best to kind of get started and introduce the panelists. I'll start with Adi Rappoport, who co-chairs the tax practice at Gunster Law Firm. He resides in West Palm Beach, and he works with a number of entities, including family offices, on federal and state taxation, estate planning, as well as M&A and general corporate law. So Adi, thanks for being here. Look forward to hearing your insight. We have Kirby Rosbach. Kirby is an author and actually authored the book, The Complete Family Office Handbook, which has been featured in the discussion today. Obviously, we've seen emails go around about that. So Kirby, we're excited to have you here. She's also the founder of Tamarind Partners, which is a family office consulting firm. And she's a founder and the chief learning office for Tamarind Learning, which is a virtual learning platform for advisors of financial wealth and beneficiaries as well. So Kirby, thanks so much for being here. Looking forward to getting your insights as well. We have Samy Dwek. Samy started a consulting firm, White House consulting firm in 2019 that partners with family offices and ultra high net worth families on a host of issues. He spent about 25 years before that with HSBC and JP Morgan. He actually started the single family office practice at JP Morgan in the EMEA region. And he's originally from England. So Samy, thanks so much for being here. He's been been very helpful in getting some insights on what we're going to be discussing today. So look forward to hearing from you as well. And we have Wendy Craft, and Wendy works with a single family office in New York, and has a plethora of family office experience and putting together conferences and just being really a thought leader in the space. So Wendy, thanks for being here. Looking forward to hearing from you as well. And then we have Gary Damaraki, who is a managing director with Oppenheimer, and he works with family office clients really on the investment side, showing them deal flow from a private equity perspective, hedge fund perspective, as well as direct deals. Gary was also the CEO of 2 family offices in Boston and helped actually build and run the whole operations for those family offices as well. So like I mentioned, phenomenal panel. Really happy and humbled to be, leading this and talking to you all. So without further ado, why don't we get started? So Samy, I'd love to hear from you and just get more of your background with family offices. Sure. And get a sense from you, what are some of the trends that you've been seeing most recently as it relates to best practice with these single family offices?
Sure. So first of all, thank you, Pamela, for hosting the panel, and thanks to Marty for the invite. I'm very privileged to be with the other panelists. So my background is I spent 19 years with JP Morgan, where I focused on single family offices, mostly in emerging markets, in Europe, Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Middle East. And as you mentioned, Pamela, I set up their single family office for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I did a survey of 125 single family offices globally, which was very interesting to kind of get the understanding and a feel of what family offices have been doing. And in my practice, I'm working with about 9 global families, overseeing about 5 billion of assets currently. And it's very interesting in terms of, you know, what's going on in family office world. I think there has been, and the panels, the earlier panels have been so important, because what we're seeing is a drive and a need from family offices for direct investments going away from the big funds. I think that they're not personally happy with it. They want more control. They want to stay in as long as they need to in an investment. So they're creating these groups like this family office network. There are many other groups where people are sharing ideas, sharing due diligence. So I think that's something that is a growing trend and will continue to grow. I also think that it's very important to mention that, and by the way, Carol Pepper had kind of alluded to this. I think there needs to be, and there's starting to be a bit more of a focus on family governance, because if the family offices haven't done that with the families, what we normally find with a single family office is once the first generation goes, the family office starts to fall apart because there isn't the connection as in depth, the connection on an intellectual level, on a ethics level, on a you know, to be able to continue, and the family office then just starts to dissipate. So I'd say those are kind of the key things. Reporting is another one. The issues I've seen in reporting, either reporting to the family or just tracking their investments, that has been a very big issue that people are starting to focus on. And there are some good solutions out there. So that would be my kind of kickoff to the session.
Perfect. Kirby, why don't we hear from you? I would love to hear kind of your thoughts in terms of some of the best practices you're seeing.
So I am seeing a lot of things emerge as a function of this wonky period that we're in that is actually sparking and disrupting. It's like a double disruption. The COVID pandemic created the need to like revisit, revise, and refresh operating norms, risk controls, policies and procedures. So it's natural, piggybacking on Carol's prior comments, that governance is actually being upended on a lot of fronts. So you think about the traditional investment governance, and if you had a due diligence policy that said you had to meet with the front office, middle office, or back office for any manager, and COVID has now basically said, no, you're not, you've got to start to work around those new disruptions. But in a weird way, roadblocks, things that weren't able to be changed in the past because families had impasse, disagreement, didn't have alignment, things are actually getting done now in a weird way because people know what matters: their health, their safety, their security, and basically having a contingency plan. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing, both personally in my own family, but also the families we work with. And, you know, I do sit on both sides. I have, you know, won the DNA lottery, being born into an affluent enterprising family, had no hand in creating the wealth. So I can speak from that perspective that, you know, a lot of families that are very stiff and rigid are now having to flex in ways that they've never flexed before. And so I do think, in a weird sort of silver lining to COVID, is that change is actually happening on certain fronts where there were impasses. I talked to Catherine McCarthy recently about this, and she's been witnessing this as well.
Perfect, that's helpful. Wendy, can you share with us your thoughts on what you're seeing working with your family? That would be helpful as well.
I think we just lost Wendy. She just dropped off.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I just want to make sure we have, okay. So Gary, can you?
There she is. She's back.
Oh, Wendy, we just had a question for you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I got booted off by Zoom.
Oh, no, it's okay. It happens. That's a new normal, right? Wanted to get your thoughts in terms of the work that you're doing with your family, as well as some of the discussions. I know that you spend a lot of time with other family offices as well. Talk to us a little bit about some of the trends that you're seeing in best practices, and what are some things that you've seen change in terms of priorities given COVID?
Well, I run the family office for a third generation family. And they're primarily in real estate. So as far as they go, they're sort of holding, because we're in the New York metropolitan area and there's a moratorium on evictions, and we kind of have to see the fallout there. But with the other families, there's been a renewed interest. A lot of the families have a philanthropy mandate, and they had their set little niche things. And all of a sudden, everybody's like, wow, how can I help? How can I use our foundation dollars to help in this situation? And they've really stepped up. It's been amazing. And quite a few of the other families who had never dipped their toe in what we would think of as venture are like, wow, can I do there? I never have invested in healthcare. How can I help? So I don't want to say they kind of woke up, but they sort of shifted from, oh, I need to buy this building, and oh, we need to do this educational platform, to wham, where can I use what I have to help the community? And it's been a beautiful thing to see. It's been pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, Gary, if you wouldn't mind, I would love to hear from you some of the dynamics you've seen families focus on in terms of what their priorities have been given COVID, whether it's from an investing standpoint or just in relation to what are their priorities in terms of the family mission. What are some things that you've seen?
So I'll talk about two things. First, on the investment side, similar to what Samy just said, I'm seeing that family offices don't want to do these multi-billion-dollar private equity funds anymore, right? They want to find unique opportunities. They're looking at lower middle market buyouts, 100, 200, $300 million funds. You know, for the last 10 or 15 years, hedge funds have been so out of favor. I think they still are, but there's nothing like volatile markets, right, to get long short back in favor. And you know, there aren't many, but there are a handful of really, really good long short hedge fund managers out there. So when the markets were down 30% in the first quarter, they're actually up, right? And there were these guys that did that in the financial crisis. They did it in the internet bubble, you know. So they're looking, and they're hard to find, but you can find them, and they're looking at direct deals too, right? And so so I'm spending a lot of my time, you know, in those kind of three areas. But on the structuring side, like Kirby just said, it's really critical policies and procedures, checks and balances, because I don't know if people know this, but it's factual that a lot of family offices lose money. They get stolen from. You know, you don't read about it. I was at a family office that there was massive theft before I got there. That's why I got there. I'm talking tens of millions, 50 million. There's a lot of people that lose a lot. And this is before COVID, right? This is when there's lots of people around and it's still happening. So now in a COVID world, when people are remote, I think the risks of theft and the risk of loss goes up even higher. And risk control is really, really important. And I think what family offices sometimes fail at is they don't run their family office like a business, right? And they have to run it like a small investment shop, like a small Oppenheimer or Goldman, you know, a bunch of us have come from those kind of places. You have to run your family office with those same type of controls. And especially now when people are remote, you can't take emails, right, to disperse money. You still have to have your checks and balances in place and still have to talk to people on the phone. So there's a lot of structural things that a lot of family offices don't focus on. And I think they need to, and especially in this COVID world, they need to focus on it.
Yeah, that's helpful. Addie, thanks so much for joining us. Just kind of moving forward from what Gary was talking about and digging in more on the family side, talk to us a little bit about what you've been seeing with your clients as it relates to some of the changes they've made from a tax perspective, from an estate planning perspective, given their shift in priorities of family dynamics.
Yeah, no, I think, so adding to what Kirby and Gary were saying, in addition to all this additional emphasis on family governance and due diligence and philanthropy, is the 2020 presidential election and the possibility the tax policy in this country could change materially with the next administration. And that has created sort of an accelerator for people to start looking at the items that may have been sitting on the to-do list. So there's, you know, we're all sitting around at home. There's less travel, so there's more planning going on. But in addition, there's this huge catalyst to plan around. So a lot of the planning that's been going on, some of it is tax driven. So how do you maximize the use of federal tax exemptions and trying to leverage those gifts using the various techniques that are available. But a critical adjunct to that is the governance piece that Kirby was talking about. So on top of tax affecting your estate plan, what are you going to do the next 100 years? Who are going to be your trustees? Are you using family office personnel? Are you using corporate fiduciaries? Are you going to set up a private trust company to deal with those issues? And so it's generated a lot of conversations, a lot of work, and it's certainly accelerating those thoughts. And what Wendy was saying as well, philanthropy. How are we going to use philanthropy to drive what our family is trying to do? So I would say in terms of some of the dynamics that have changed, I would add two more things to the list. Geography, which is now we're all, look at this seminar today, we're all in different places, nationally, internationally, in our homes, presenting, working, and it's same as happening for families. So there's discussion in the last panel, what's happening in New York? Are people leaving? Well, not everybody's leaving, but clearly people are coming to Florida. I was reported Goldman Sachs this week is moving its asset management team to South Florida. Think of all the people that come along with that. Think of the families that are moving down here of wealth. And so there's a economic component to it. There's a tax component to it because Florida is a desirable location. You look at Marty's background, that's our Miami office. It's great weather. We have great amenities and we have a great tax climate, and that's a big driver. So what's happening in Florida is also happening in other low tax states like Texas, for instance. And so there's a lot of mobility right now. The other piece with succession planning is really generating conversations about how does this family office platform going to work from generation to generation? It's anywhere from who's hiring and firing the staff and how do we keep those people happy and transitioning, as Samy was saying, from one generation to the next generation. It's a conversation about who's making investment decisions versus who's making administration decisions. And so all that needs to be baked into the documents that we work on here and the law piece of it. So all this planning is distilled into actual legal documents, whether it's policies and procedures, whether it's the investment documents, whether it's the trust documents. And we're seeing that in spades now at the end of the year.
Kirby, can you talk a little bit about, and Adib mentioned this when he was talking about some of the changes we've seen and what's led to some of the shift in geography. Talk a little bit about technology and how that has, how family offices have incorporated the new changes in technology and some of the best practices around that.
So that is probably a whole day plus long discussion, but here's just some highlights and thoughts. A lot of family offices are increasingly interested in, call it Walmart type providers that can do a lot of things, document storage, perhaps provide a private portal, do operational trust accounting, do general ledger, reporting. So there's this increased need that now that I work virtually, I need to plug in. And oh, by the way, there are some incredibly robust systems out there. But back to Adib and Gary and Samy, I mean, part of the issue is that you need people. You need people to own and run systems. And so the one caution I will just put out there, if anyone's trying to spool up a new system for their family office, be very cognizant of the resources you have to own and drive. You need a systems administrator. That is very different than the person who writes the check to buy the software or the platform. And you need to differentiate and bifurcate roles and responsibilities. Back to Adib's comment, you can't have the same person managing the general ledger who's authorizing wires and writing checks. So policies and procedures, technology cannot shortcut all of those things. You still need to have separations of church and state in a lot of these technology platforms, but there's some great stuff out there. The only other last couple things I would leave you with is be very, very cognizant that there's a history behind why the software was created in the first place. So that history tells you a lot who they're marketing it towards and who it's really designed to be used by. And that may or may not be you. So sync up the story of why it was created in the first place and to what end, and then really have a good understanding on where is it headed. Because the worst thing to happen is you onboard a system and then it gets acquired in 6 months, and now you've got to, adjust. We've also seen great platforms that actually were started by family offices. That's got to be great, right? And then they said, we don't really need to promote this, so we don't need to commercialize it. We just build it for ourselves, and then they're gone. So those are just some quick highlights on technology, but I think there's a lot of great systems out there. Just work with a consultant or find somebody to help you get the right one for you.
Pam, I just want to jump in here. I just want to jump in here for 1 second, and I'm Gary. I know I'm probably talking about something you're going to get to right now, but the Rick Stone had talked about virtualization of family offices a couple of years back during one of our meetings here, and I don't think any family office out there, except for the largest ones, really count the roles and responsibilities of what everybody's doing. And Gary, you're an expert at this, Gary. I mean, all you guys are experts. So, Kirby, maybe you can talk about that virtualization, or at least like counting. Like you said, it's got to be like a Chinese wall between responsibilities.
Gary, do you want to go first?
Yeah, the checks and balances and the policies and procedures have to be written, right? They have to be written down so people can follow them. But now that everyone's virtual, they also have to be accessible, because we had written policies and procedures and we had booked, but they have to be accessible to everyone who's not in the office, right? And so to follow them. So technology, and my experience is that most family offices are understaffed, right? So it's all about people. You have to get really, really good quality people. You have to get enough of them. And then you have to write down policies and procedures, checks and balances. But now with technology and people being virtual, you have to make sure everyone's following them, even though people are virtual.
Yeah, and just to add to Gary's comments, let's be real. If you do your first systems implementation, you are going to open up the skeletons in your closet. So be aware that if you have poor accounting practices, you haven't properly spooled up entities correctly, you will start to unearth all the prickly, unhappy things that are likely hidden in your closet. It's a very painful experience, and it's one that don't take it lightly, but also realize that it's a really healthy exercise, because you might end up cleansing entities that are like they're dead, not doing anything. You might wind down entities that are no longer useful. So it becomes a catalyst for all these other activities. But if you don't have good policies and procedures when you start an implementation or onboarding, it can be an absolutely like hit the wall, painful experience. And I think owners need to respect the bounds of operators and know their role and know how they participate in the process. And they need to give authority to the right people and the right roles to make technology work well and efficiently. Otherwise, you can create a recipe for challenge.
And you need
if I can just chime in. So if I can just chime in, thank you.
Because that's where you catch the frog.
Samy, I want to hear from you on this topic as well.
So look, I think Kirby and Gary are bringing up really critical things. Okay, so first we start with the foundations. And I think the foundation is the family governance that's going to determine how you build the family office. And then the CEO of the future family office should be there at that inception, because if they don't buy in and they're not going to build it the way the family wants, that's already a recipe for disaster. Let's start with that. Then you need all the operating systems, and I mean the procedures and everything else. Again, that's what makes the strength of the walls. But as much as they defer and delegate to the people in the family office, the issues I have seen in family offices is where they think that, okay, I've delegated, so I'm good now. And Gary, where we've seen issues of fraud in a family office is because they've left it and they're not checking. And there should be an audit. You just mentioned it. They should be checking on their family office, and family offices should be happy for that, because that's also protecting them too. Have I left the back door open? What are my risks? What do I need to focus on? What's changed? How has the family changed? Has their outlook changed? What are the views of the kids? How involved are they? Because if you forget the next generation, that's going to be a problem down the road. Make sure that everything is aligned with the family, right? The family office and the family have to be aligned. If they're not aligned, it's not going to work. So all these building blocks are necessary to make a strong, viable family office that will last generations. Otherwise, it's going to end in tears. And Gary, I've come across a number of family offices where the reporting was so poor. I turned to them and said, it's so easy to steal millions of dollars because there are a small rounding error. Rounding error, that's terrible. Should never happen. Yeah. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
I've seen family offices that the reporting is an Excel spreadsheet with 2 pages.
This is Wendy. Sammy, I want to jump in here because we had rather a famous case in US, and I know you're going to know the one I'm talking about, where everything was set up very well. And everything had to be double checked, and wires couldn't just be sent by one person. And then what happened, and Pamela, you can chime in on this too. What literally happened is the family principal said, why are you bothering me? Don't I have a family office for this? And the funds and the advisors felt that that was the apparent authority that they could get what they needed just from the family office, and fraud ensued. So, you know, Sammy, you're very right when you say both parts have to do it, but sometimes we do struggle in getting the family principal side to do their part. They want to, they just, you know, they get busy. So, you know, Kirby, I don't know if you have ideas on that, but that's something we really struggle with.
Yeah, I totally, well, I've been asked to be expert witness to fraud cases. And quite honestly, it's the saddest, most painful thing to see, because it's usually really good people. And I sat in a circle one time, I can't say the family office, but they basically said, listen, good people do bad things. Nobody hires a sinister, bad person into their office. It's good people get into bad situations, like their kids are ill, the ex-husband's in debt and they can't pay alimony. So good people end up making really bad choices. And she told a painful story of her most senior accountant actually taking little streams off of her grandchildren's trusts that it wasn't able to see, you know, this transparently at all, but they had a third-party auditor come in and they caught it. And it was actually kind of by happenstance. And I bring this example up because family offices also operate beyond norms, right? Anyone would have probably fired her, you know, possibly filed charges, everything else. What this family office decided to do is they kept her employed. They made her pay back with interest everything that she had been stealing for about 10 years back into the grandchildren's account. And so A, she didn't lose custody of her children, and B, she still had a job, because they knew if she was no longer employed, she was really not going to have a good chance of getting employed again. And they changed their risk controls. They changed how they operated. And I tell that story as a litmus test to say, you need sometimes a third party to come in objectively. And we've done it. We've done diagnostics and audits to just give a refresh.
Absolutely. 100%.
One quick point on the legal side of policies. I mean, adherence is critical, because a lot of families and organizations, you put policies together and they go in a drawer, which actually creates legal liability, not help, because you're actually violating your own policies when you take certain actions in the future. And so you need to be, certainly needs to be a culture of not only adopting them, but, you know, constantly monitoring them, updating them, and making sure that your actual operations follow the procedures that you adopted.
So we've talked about kind of, you know, some of these best practices around technology and policy and procedures. One of the things I think, you know, a lot of people are obviously struggling with is the distance, right? And I know information sharing is so important in the family office community. So kind of what are you guys seeing as some of the best practices, some of the tools that people are using to get information on, whether it be, you know, procedures related to risk management, investing? What are you guys seeing? I mean, Samy, maybe we'll start with you. What are you seeing some of the family offices employ in those areas to get the information they need?
So, and again, Gary alluded to this, so good on Gary. I think if a family office is honest with itself. It needs to have an annual audit so that you can see what's going on and see what's going wrong. In the year of COVID, I think where people are changing, and I think this is a temporary change. This is my personal opinion, where everyone's working from home and everyone thinks they're more effective. I think it isn't. I think people are losing efficiency because being able to turn around and speak to the guy next to you to now I've got to get him on the phone. I actually think they're losing efficiency. And you can try to patch that with technology, be it Zoom or FaceTime or WhatsApp chat or Signal, which is safer, by the way, than WhatsApp. No plug, I don't work for them. But they're looking for other alternatives to communicate. But at the end of the day, I think what needs to happen is people need to get back into the office in a safe environment. The technology, it's just a patch. It's a temporary patch. It's not going to work long term. Having different people from different backgrounds. I came across a family office where all the employees came from one institution, which gives a very blinkered view of the world and a very blinkered kind of setup of procedures. And I think that in itself, because they're all so close, opens the door to potential risk down the road that because they know each other so well, they could pull a fast one. So having that mix of people. So checking, making sure that the principals are involved, even if it's a monthly call, just to check in, just to go through things, just a once over. I think that, that's something that needs to be done in the era of COVID. But again, I'm seeing people use different systems to control reporting to the family members. Again, it's good to a degree. I think conversations are more important, constant communication, family meetings, a Zoom family meeting. You've got to have everyone around the table.
Mm-hmm. Wendy, I'd love to hear from you and get your thoughts on this.
It's been really hard. I mean, I don't know what everybody else's experience is where they're geographically located. And that was a very good point. But I'm in the New York metro area and we got hit hard and we got hit fast. And the problem with that is nobody knew what was going on. We thought we were going home for a week or two. And then it became obvious it was longer. So it took a little while to figure out, where are the family members going to go to stay? Where are we going to go to stay? How are we going to do this? And I was really lucky to have a family office principal who said, you know what, we'll figure that out. What I really am worried about is all of you. And that was amazing. And he made sure we were all okay. We had what we needed to do our jobs. And then we just started saying, in a kind of a round robin, what do you think? How should we do this? A lot of people I reached out to in those first month and a half had no better idea of how to do this either. So it took a while. And by May, we started figuring it out. By June, it was a little easier. And now we sort of have a system, but we don't like it. We work well off of each other when we can all talk, converse, throw out ideas. And there's just really no way to do that now effectively. People at home have kids homeschooling, they have things going on. It's really hard, but you can make it work in the short term. And that's what we're doing with technology, with, encrypted, reports, everything we can do, we have been doing.
Great, that's helpful.
And there are certain platforms out there. Not going to name names because I'm not promoting anyone and I'm not in bed with anyone. So, but that can help with some of that governance. Like if you're looking at a deal and you maybe play a role in doing the diligence from a financial, operational, subject matter expertise, there's new softwares out there that you can plug in and give everyone sort of their ability to participate, say, in this time capsule of information, where you miss the round table, right? You don't have the boardroom table to get everyone around, or you can't kick the tires going to meet the lead, C-suite executives or the key directors and managers. So I think there are ways that, you can kind of create a false but virtual, sort of avatar-like environment. It's just hard. And a lot of families they're not thinking, they're like triaging still, even now. And so I think I'm going to call it the elephant in the room too, is that I've talked to a lot of family office executives who've said, peace out. Like, I'm taking care of my family. And so the other thing no one's talking about, because I think Samy and Gary, you mentioned this too with Wendy, is that there's a finite supply of family office people. So COVID has compressed. Like there wasn't that many people before, but if you got a dying elderly parent or child that's vulnerable, or you're vulnerable yourself, I can't tell you how many key leaders I've seen in very high respected family offices say, I got to put my family first. And so family offices are actually having to really go in this new HR direction that we've never done before. Because let's just face it, family office executives get beaten down. I mean, they get worked 9 times out of 10, but add COVID, it's like fuel on the fire. So that's just another trend I've seen. And I think it's going to raise the bar for compensation and, you know, better systems for these offices.
And better treatment.
Yeah, agreed.
What family offices too are, I think, craving now more than ever because of COVID is interaction, right? Not just interaction within your own family office, but this interaction with other family offices. Because usually, you know, you go to Marty's conferences and you meet other people and you talk and you share ideas, and that's not happening as much, right? And so, and that's for best practices, and that's for also investment ideas. And so I just get on the phone, and I get on the phone at least once a week with a family office, and they're like so happy to talk to me because, you know, I think they're just not having these conversations with a lot of other family offices like they normally do because there's so many other things going on, and they want to know what other people are investing in and what other people are doing and how they can do things better or find, you know, interesting, unique investments that other people might be finding that they're not seeing the same flow right now.
I will say we're up in New York. It's snowing at my house today. Not sticking a lot, but it's snowing. And we've been having dinners once a week in New York City outside under heat lamps with 4 or 5 families. So we can get together and do that. And we're well apart, and it is outside and it's small numbers. But everybody goes because we want to see each other and we want to talk to each other, and we haven't been able to.
So Gary, I want to ask you, as someone who's, you know, worked with a number of family offices and helped build them, what are some of the factors that you've seen that are really key to setting up a family office to be successful, you know, for those who are looking to create one? And what advice would you give to family offices in general, especially given the environment we're in with COVID? What are some of the priorities they should really think about?
The number one priority is people, right? You have to hire really good people. You have to pay them to retain them, and you have to hire more, right? You know, I said this earlier on, but I think, you know, family offices are understaffed, and some of them, with all the money that they have, you know, they don't want to spend it, and that's not a place where you should not be spending it. So that
made Wendy's day.
You did, and I'm laughing, you guys, because there's a family in the Midwest who I won't name, but they needed more people because they were allocating like $100 million a year into deals. And they only had a few people working in that branch of the family office. So instead of hiring more people, what they did is they made their minimum allocation $20 million, so they wouldn't have to hire more people. And I'm like, that's so short-sighted. You're killing me.
I don't know how many times I talk to family offices that want to invest in direct deals, and they don't have the staff
right.
Analyzing a direct deal. They don't have staff members that have investment banking experience or analyst experience. And if they do make the direct investment and it goes bad, they don't have the people to step in and take the company over and sit on the board. So like a lot of these people are talking so much about these direct deals, and they shouldn't even be looking at them because they're not equipped to make these decisions.
Yeah, and I just want to build on
means a bigger platform. Oh, I'm sorry, Eddie, go ahead.
Just real quick, building on Gary's point, I'm surprised at how many of these key employees are at will and don't have contracts with the family office, because when you find good people, you probably want to make that relationship more sticky and make them feel more comfortable and secure in that position. And a lot of times that conversation just never takes place, and you end up losing good people because they didn't understand their status in the family office. And so employment agreements or other kind of arrangements can really go a long way towards solidifying those relationships, even from generation to generation.
Samy, did you want to add something before we move on? You're on mute.
when the computer wants to behave. I was going to say, Wendy, when they're doing lots of smaller sizes, they forget that the follow-up to follow every deal, they're actually multiplying the amount of work they're going to do and find themselves in a bind. That's the most illogical thing, but that makes so much sense when you're dealing with a family office. Yeah. Sometimes it just defies all logic. But then I think that's good for people like Gary, Kirby, Addy, and myself, because then we can come in and help sort that out.
Well, it's good for us to have that kind of Rolodex. And Kirby and I have had lots of those conversations, because when I get in a bind, you know, at least I have the trust in my family principal and I know who to call. It's like, help, you know?
Yeah, there's so many families right now who are feeling different pain points from this. And it's just not the operations of the office, it's family members literally themselves. I've had families that I've worked with in California, and obviously we know what's happening in California. They've literally had their family office burned down. So, you know, there's a lot of craziness happening beyond COVID, with global warming and climate change. That's also creating a lot of chaos, also on the operating business side. So as much as you can reduce noise and be very focused, and sort of have a strategic and tactical plan. I just was talking to another peer who was like, Kirby, can you send me some help for a strategic plan? It's year end, right? But it's so critical that we get out of the noise and we actually think about, what do we want to try to accomplish in 2021, despite all of this? And then we really think tactically, how are we going to get it done in this new normal? And who do we have to do the work? And do we have to hire or augment with outside consultants or resources to get it done? And let's just talk about the other elephant in the room, which is some families are like, peace, I'm done. Family office, woohoo, not doing this anymore. So there are a lot of families who are actually calling up the Morgan Stanleys and calling up the JP Morgans and Oppenheimers and so forth, who are looking to figure out how to sort of exit their family office structure, because COVID has been so hard to manage that they're like, we want to fire somebody else. We don't want to have to manage and try to, handle this virtually with our own people.
Can I jump in there, Pamela, to respond to that too?
Yeah, sure.
I really, there is no family office staff, and we are very understaffed. Most family offices don't have enough people. So we really do rely on outside consultants, because nobody can be, the master of every single bit that goes from legacy to trust and estate. You just can't. Mm-hmm. There are some family offices that have 200 employees and they run like a financial firm. They probably can. Smaller firms prefer to use outside consultants. Our only problem that when we get that, and that goes to what Kirby was saying, is sometimes when you use consultants, they really just want to sit with the family. And then the family's like, I really want to go to Italy. I don't want to meet with these people for 20 hours. Isn't that your job? So I think outside consultants are a really big resource for smaller family offices, and we need them desperately. And I need outside consultants to understand that the family doesn't always want to give up a whole 40 hours a week to sit with them. So it's a balance. You got to get the right consultants. And once you do, and like I said, Kirby and I have been friends for years. Once you do, and they know the way you work and you understand the way they work, it really can help the family and be good for everybody.
But let me add to what you just said, Wendy, because I think it's really important. So I've dealt with a lot of international families, and to your point, I was dealing with a family based out of Monaco that had over 60 employees, and they were built like a bank, okay? And it was really interesting. And that's good for some, but I also think there are a lot of families in this place, to Kirby, I think it's not I'm done with the family office. I think some families build a family office for the wrong reason, because it's kind of sexy and it's a nice term and they don't need it, okay? And then they wake up and go, what the hell am I doing? I don't need this. In fact, I sat with a Central American family who cashed out, and we're looking at setting up a single family office, and we're having the discussion. And when it got down to it, I actually turned around and said, you don't need a family office. This would be a waste of time and resources. You need to go put your money with a couple of different financial institutions. Let's work on finding the right banks. Not because you have a lot of money, you have to have a family office. There has to be a purpose. So what's the purpose of having a family office, right? Let's start there. That's kind of the beginning. Do I need one? Does it suit the needs of the family? Is this going where I want it to be? Because if not, to your point, let's free up those resources for Wendy who needs them, rather than throwing money down a pit on something that doesn't suit the family or the family needs.
That is spot on. And most of them have no idea why they're doing it. Or in my case, I run a third generation family office. They know why they have it. It's very important to them, and it's done a lot for investments. It's done a lot for legacy and everything else, but they're well aware of why they're doing it. And I think a lot of families, you know, come into wealth, have a liquidity event and go, woohoo, family office. And that's not a fun ride for the people who run it or the family principals.
Can I just interject here for 1 second? How to do with what Sammy's comment just was, which is that there's a lot family offices are putting far more resources into direct deals, which are a far smaller part of their portfolios than into their general management. Any thoughts on that?
I'll kick it off if I can. I think a lot of families want to go the direct investment route, and they may start the family office based on that, and in many cases, wrong people. And in the other issue is, if the first deal goes south, and you don't know which deal's going to go well and go south until you're in for a bit, they fold their family offices. So I find a lot of family offices are reticent to go down that route, because it adds so much more risk to what they do. And unless you've got the right people who come from the right background that can really add true value in terms of analyzing, using their network, follow up, getting the right legal people to negotiate the in and the out, and making sure what's my investment target and what's my duration target, how long do I want to hold this? Unless they have that kind of aligned from the get-go, I will guarantee it's going to be disaster. And so a lot of family offices are they're tinkering on it, they play around with it, they put small amounts of money, and until they get real success, they're not really in it. They think they're in it, and it's hit and miss. Wendy, I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, I'm not a real big fan of sprinkle investing, but I've seen it.
On the flip side,
and it's resource intensive, by the way.
There's great operating family offices that really act like PE or investment bank type operations. And so on the flip side, there's a huge number of family offices that's really all they do. And then they actually dabble in cash management. I mean, it's really a barbell approach. And I want to honor the fact that a lot of the families that hire us are those operators. Like, they have skin in the game, they're doing direct investments, but they're literally operating major enterprises and companies, sometimes publicly or privately held. So I think you got to be good at stick to your knitting. If you do it, do it.
Well, they should be doing it. Those operators are the ones that should be doing those direct deals. The problem is, you get these family offices that just because you have money doesn't make that's not a qualification to make you a private equity guy, or to even be capable of making a direct deal.
If you're a widget maker, it doesn't mean that you're a banker.
Well, I would throw this one to Adi. I would say, from the family office perspective, we've seen cases where, and I think, legally, you have to put in some parameters when you set up a family office. And, we've had son-in-laws, daughter-in-laws come in and say, you people always bought buildings, but yes, I do hedge funds, and we should put our money there. And I think, if the family has never done that and their entire family office is not geared that way, you can run into problems. And I've seen it with friends.
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I think, over the last couple of hours, the panel before this one, due diligence, which is, how well do you understand what you're investing in, and is it, fit within your overall plan of investment, like Samy said. And yeah, you definitely see on the legal side where, the deal terms come to us to review the fund documents or the investment documents. And it's apparent that, there's the underwriting from the family office's perspective has not been done, or is incomplete, or they don't really understand the deal as well as they thought they did. When you start
So how do you be tactful about that?
You start asking questions, you act curious. Well, what's the management fee? do you understand that there's two layers here? Because there's an operating company that's charging a management fee, and then there's like this, you know, feeder fund that they're having you go into that's charging another management fee just for the privilege of being in the feeder fund. And you start pointing out things, and you know, pretty soon the light goes off. But yeah, it's surprising how often that happens.
But Adi, if I may, I think sometimes it's actually if we can build the right structure for a family. So when the family has the wealth to build a decent family office, I'm a big fan of PTCs, private trust companies, because then it helps the family office keep the people in the right box, if you know what I mean, because then you do it based on ability. So you just want to live off the assets, that's fine. There's a place for you, and you're good at technology. Okay, we can set aside within the structure an area for you to do investing in technology. So, and give people targets and goals and educate them. And I think that enables both the family, the patriarch, and I also think it enables the family office to manage the family and kind of not have to tippy-toe around those soft issues that are hard to deal with. And I actually think it makes over time life easier, because additional to that on the PTC, you have a board, and some will be family members and some will be professionals external to the family. So you're kind of professionalizing what the family does, right? I mean, Eddie, you should probably talk about this more than me. I'm not a lawyer. But you know, I just think it makes it easier for a family office, in my humble opinion, and better for a family, not just for the current generation, but for future generations.
Yeah, no, I think we're seeing definitely a trend. Florida passed its private trust company legislation about 6 years ago. Gunster is set up probably more in the state of Florida than any other firm. And what we're seeing is that becoming, for the right families, the chassis on which their family office runs, as opposed to, you know, a corporation or an LLC. It provides it checks a lot of boxes, like Sammy's saying, in terms of long-term governance, who's going to serve as fiduciaries, and also professionalizing a lot of what you're doing. But to Kirby's point, not everybody is going to be on that part of the spectrum. And so you really need a family office that wants to be a professional operation. And so it's what do we want to be, the point you made earlier, Sammy.
I will just throw out like a shout out that we added a new chapter in the second edition of the Complete Family Office Handbook, precisely on setup and structure and creating a private trust company, because there's just not a lot of literature on it. And there's so many different jurisdictions, and there's delegated versus directed, and there's a lot of nuance. Yep. That, as Adi knows, it's the devil's in the details, and it may work for you, but it's something that you really need to thoroughly vet and explore and understand operationally, the intensity, the expenses, the overhead. So, I mean, it could be a solution, but it's not a silver bullet necessarily.
For sure. I mean, always legal counsel needs to be involved, like an AD, right? Otherwise, we're all lost.
So I think we have time for one more question. So Wendy, I want to hear from you kind of what your outlook is for next year. Where are you seeing opportunities for investing as it relates to family offices? So I know your family office obviously is real estate, but I know you have conversations with others. So would love to hear your insight on that.
Well, I think, you know, on the real estate front, we're seeing opportunity in single family housing, which we had never really played with prior to the pandemic, but due to people moving out of the cities and more remotely, that's become quite a high priced area. So we're looking at that. I think we'll probably end up, if the vaccine goes around and everybody is starting to get vaccinated late spring into summer, we'll probably start looking at distressed assets, probably around March, like what distressed real estate we can pick up. Keeping an eye on, you know, the crypto markets. They seem to be jumping up. And I think a lot of other families outside of ours are very involved in the healthcare space that maybe they weren't involved before, or maybe they were involved to some extent. I know one of the family offices that I'm close with has gone around, and they're inventors, so they're really great people. They've invented home stations for cell phones, for all kinds of stuff and other little things to do. And it's been kind of neat to watch. So I think I think you're going to see a mix. I think there is going to be a lot of distressed real estate picking up. And then we're going to have to wait and see. Are people moving back? Are they not moving back? I think you're going to see a little more in the healthcare and venture than we probably would normally see in an average year. And I think some families are still holding to see what happens.
Gary, what about you? What are you seeing in terms of what are your thoughts on the outlook for next year?
So I think the fourth industrial revolution is here, and it's here to stay. Technology is going to be huge in 2021. That's AI, machine learning, 5G, sensors, right? Every car is going to have 10 sensors on it. I heard like every farm animal in this country is going to have a sensor in it. Healthcare, as Wendy just said. So between tech and healthcare, there are going to be lots of winners and big winners. But I think 2021, though, there will also be a lot of big losers, right? And so it's critical on where you're putting money. And like I said, there are a very small handful of long, short hedge funds that will do both, right? They'll pick the winners and short the losers. And that's really the maximum way to make money, I think, in 2021. But yeah, you got to make sure you're on the right side of both of those trades, right? So there's tech and healthcare, huge winners, and there's going to be a bunch of huge losers in 2020.
Anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah. So if I may, look, this has been an incredible year. I think COVID initially is going to be very hard on commercial real estate, so office space. But I think, and I said this before, people need to be in the office working with one another. It's really important for creativity and communication. So I think that there'll be an initial dip, time to buy. And then I think people are going to take more office space because instead of having open plan, they're going to want individual offices. So I think that's really important. I think any kind of nascent health technology is going to be a place to watch. Telemedicine, I think that's going to be big. How they store data because of HIPAA rules, I think that's going to be big. Because let's face it, elderly people now are getting used to this new technology. They're scared to go to the hospital. And so they prefer a telemedicine route. I'm on the board of a hospital, and there has been a big flow of people not going into the hospital and going online. And that's going to continue. That's not it's here and it's gone. So, I think those are the things to look at. Technology, Gary, I think there's a part of technology which will do well, but I think big tech, I think they've got a big thing coming. Post everything that's happened in the election and the fears of controlling information and all this kind of stuff, I'd be a little bit more concerned about that. I think equities are going to do well generally if you look at the general market. So if you don't want to try and bet on sectors, solely because, and I think Wendy alluded to this, fixed income, and I started my life as a fixed income manager. Fixed income doesn't pay bupkis. When you look at the yields, take out taxes and take out management fees, you're almost at zero. So I'm going to go into high dividend yielding equities. I'm going to go into equities generally because I've got more likelihood of making a return than sitting close to zero in fixed income. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
I have just 10 seconds because I'm going to answer the question slightly differently. I think philanthropy and the role of private foundations in our world is going to continue to be very influential. The amount of money moving into private foundations and charitable vehicles, and it's going to do a lot of good. So that's my feel-good prediction.
That's great. So Marty, do you have anything else to add, or it looks like I don't see any questions from the audience? So
I think we really covered a lot of territory here, and I wish we could have had a panel with all 10 of you together talking about family offices and deal sourcing, because I think you would have given some fantastic insights into risk and risk management, which really wasn't addressed. Because a lot of times the appetite's bigger than your ability to digest something, right? So it's very interesting, fascinating. I had to notice that almost all of you are lawyers on the other end. So it sounds like family offices are in good hands. And I know you guys are sticklers for details. So I want to thank you all.